Captain Jiho Park stood at the viewing window of Galactic Station Meridian, watching ships from a dozen different worlds dock and depart in an endless dance of commerce and diplomacy. After 3 years of military service protecting Earth's outer colonies, he had seen many strange things, but the massive space station still impressed him. It was built by species far older than humanity, a neutral ground where wars were prevented and deals were made. "Captain, we should move to the educational sector," Dr. Yoonji Kim said, checking her data pad. "The VRYN representatives want to show us their cultural exchange program before the trade talks begin." Jiho nodded and followed the xenobiologist through the curved corridors of the station. Yoonji had been his guide through dozens of first-contact situations, always patient, always curious about the aliens they encountered. She was better at understanding the strange creatures that filled the galaxy than anyone he knew. The educational wing was different from the rest of the station. Where other areas were cold metal and efficient design, this section had been modified to accommodate different species. Some rooms had water flooding the floors for aquatic beings, others had gravity turned down to almost nothing, and some glowed with radiation that would kill a human in minutes but was normal sunlight for crystalline life forms. Vexstar waited for them at the entrance to the VRYN sector. The insectoid creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, its 4 arms moving in patterns that Yoonji's translator device struggled to interpret. The VRYN were a hive species, each individual connected to billions of others across their empire through quantum entanglement. Vexstar was what they called a hive coordinator, speaking for millions. "Welcome, humans," Vexstar clicked and chittered. The translator rendered it in a flat, emotionless voice. "We are pleased to demonstrate our methods of understanding lesser developed species." Jiho felt his jaw tighten at the phrase, lesser developed, but Yoonji touched his arm gently. They had discussed this before. Many older galactic species saw humanity as children, barely past their first steps into space. Getting angry about it would not help. They walked through several rooms where young aliens of various species were being taught galactic history and basic science. The VRYN prided themselves on their educational programs, collecting specimens from across the galaxy to study and, supposedly enrich. Everything seemed normal until they reached the human section. Yoonji stopped walking so suddenly, that Jiho almost ran into her. Through a transparent barrier, they could see a row of small cells, each one containing a human child. There were 23 children visible, ranging from what looked like 6 years old to maybe 12 or 13. Most sat on simple beds, staring at nothing. 2 younger ones were crying quietly. One boy was rocking back and forth, his arms wrapped around his knees. "What is this?" Yoonji's voice came out barely above a whisper. "These are juvenile humans," Vexstar explained, seeming pleased to discuss the subject. "Collected from transport vessel Delta 7 approximately 6 months ago. The transport passed through VRYN territorial space. According to our laws, any species entering our domain must provide reproductive specimens for biological cataloging." Reproductive specimens? Jiho could feel his heart pounding. These are children. Where are their parents? The adult humans continued their journey after surrendering the juveniles. "This is standard procedure. We have specimens from 47 different species in various stages of development." Vexstar gestured with one of its 4 arms. "The juvenile humans are adequately maintained. They receive nutrition, shelter, and regular medical examination." Yoonji moved closer to the barrier. One little girl, maybe 10 years old, looked up and saw her. Hope flashed across the child's face, quickly replaced by disappointment when she realized this adult human could not reach her. The girl's eyes were red from crying, her face pale and thin. "You took them from their families," Yoonji said. "You separated children from their parents." "We separated juveniles from adults," Vexstar corrected. "In VRYN society, young are raised communally by the hive. Individual parental attachment is unknown to us. We assumed this was similar for other species. It is not similar for humans, Jiho said, his voice dangerously quiet. Human children need their parents. They bond with their families. This is not scientific study. This is kidnapping. Vexstar's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. Kidnapping implies criminal intent. We acted within our legal rights. These juveniles are being studied to better understand human biology and development. This benefits all of galactic society. How long do you plan to keep them? Yunji asked. Until maturity. Human juveniles reach reproductive age at approximately 15 standard years, correct? We will study their development until that time, then release them. 15 years, Jiho repeated. You plan to keep children locked up for 15 years, away from their families, in these cells? These are not cells. These are observation chambers with appropriate accommodations. Vexstar seemed genuinely puzzled by their reaction. The juveniles are fed twice daily. They receive 8 hours of darkness for sleep cycles. Medical scans are performed weekly. By our standards, they are well cared for. Yunji pulled out her own scanner and pointed it at the children through the barrier. The readings made her stomach turn. Elevated stress hormones, poor nutrition absorption despite adequate food, disrupted sleep patterns, and signs of severe psychological distress. One of the younger boys showed indicators that would be classified as trauma response in adult humans. Captain, Yunji said softly, showing him the scanner. We need to contact Earth immediately. Jiho looked at the children again. The little girl who had looked at Yunji was now crying silently, tears running down her face. She had pressed her hand against the barrier, reaching toward the only adult humans she had seen in 6 months. Vexstar, Jiho said, keeping his voice level through pure force of will. We need to discuss this situation with our government. These children must be returned to their families immediately. That is not possible. Galactic law supports our right to collect specimens from ships passing through our territory. The Galactic Council has upheld this law for thousands of years. Your species agreed to all existing laws when you joined the Council 5 years ago. We did not know this law would be used to imprison our children, Yunji said. Again, you use incorrect terminology. These juveniles are not imprisoned. They are being studied. There is a significant difference. Jiho wanted to argue, to demand, to break through that barrier and carry every child to safety himself. But he was a military officer in a diplomatic situation, standing in the territory of a species that commanded billions of warriors and technology that could reduce Earth to ash. We will return to our quarters, Jiho said. Thank you for the tour. As they walked away, Jiho heard one of the children calling out. Please. Please don't leave us here. Please help us. Yunji's hands were shaking as they reached the corridor outside the VRNN sector. Jiho, those children have been in there for 6 months. 6 months away from their parents, locked in cells barely bigger than closets, being treated like laboratory animals. I know, Jiho said. Get everything you can on those children. Names, where they came from, medical conditions, everything. I need to send a message to Earth that will get their attention. What are you going to tell them? Jiho looked back toward the VRNN sector, thinking of 23 children crying in the dark, waiting for parents who could not reach them. I am going to tell them that we have a situation that requires immediate intervention. I am going to tell them that a supposedly civilized species has been keeping human children in cages for half a year. And, I am going to recommend that we bring enough ships to make the VRNN reconsider their definition of legal rights. That could start a war, Yunji said quietly. Then, we start a war, Jiho replied. Because I am not leaving those kids in there one more day than necessary. I do not care what galactic law says. I do not care about diplomatic incidents. Those are children, and someone is going to answer for this. As they walked back to their quarters, neither of them noticed the small surveillance device that followed their conversation, or the fact that Vextar was already reporting the humans' unexpected reaction to the Hive Collective. The VRNN were genuinely confused by the emotional response. In their analysis, they had done nothing wrong. That confusion was about to become the galaxy's problem. Ambassador Hyun Lee arrived at Galactic Station Meridian exactly 18 hours after receiving Captain Jiho's emergency transmission. His ship was not alone. 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyer escorts held position in orbit around the station, not threatening, but impossible to ignore. The message was clear. Earth was taking this seriously. The Galactic Council chamber was ancient, built by species that had been traveling the stars when humans still lived in caves. The circular room could accommodate hundreds of different life forms, each in their own environmental zones. Water tanks for aquatic species lined one wall. Crystalline beings sat in high radiation zones. The VRNN occupied a section maintained at temperatures that would kill most carbon-based life. Vextar stood at the center, representing the VRNN Hive Collective. The insectoid showed no sign of concern about the human warships in orbit. To a species that commanded billions of soldiers across hundreds of worlds, 3 human cruisers were barely worth noticing. This council recognizes Ambassador Hyun Lee of Earth, announced Krienal, an avian creature with bronze feathers and eyes that never blinked. As council speaker for this session, Krienal was responsible for maintaining order. State your grievance. Hyun stood, his formal diplomatic robes making him look more impressive than his short stature suggested. 6 months ago, the civilian transport Delta 7 was passing through VRNN space carrying colonists to New Perth. The VRNN stopped this transport and removed 23 human children, ages 6 to 13. These children have been held in confinement ever since, separated from their families, subjected to medical experiments without consent. The VRNN acted within their territorial rights, Krienal interrupted. Their law regarding biological specimens from passing vessels has been part of galactic legal code for over 2,000 years. Earth accepted all existing laws when joining the Council. We accepted laws we were told about, Hyun shot back. We were not informed that our children could be legally kidnapped. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Again, humans use inflammatory language. Kidnapping is a crime. We committed no crime. The juveniles were collected for legitimate scientific study. They are being adequately maintained according to VRNN standards of care. Dar. Yoonji Kim stepped forward, carrying a data pad loaded with medical scans. May I present evidence to the Council? Krienal's feathers ruffled. This is highly irregular, but, proceed. Yoonji projected holographic images above the Council floor. Scans of the children's stress levels, hormone imbalances, and neurological patterns appeared for all to see. These are the medical readings from the children currently held by the VRNN. Every single child shows signs of severe psychological trauma. 3 have stopped speaking entirely. One 7-year-old boy has developed a stress-induced seizure disorder. A 10-year-old girl has lost 15% of her body weight despite adequate nutrition. Physical measurements are irrelevant, Vextar stated. The juveniles are alive and receiving care. Temporary stress is expected during any scientific study. Temporary? Yoonji's voice rose. You plan to keep them for years. And, this is not stress. This is trauma that will affect them for the rest of their lives. A new voice entered the discussion. Torvin, an amphibious creature that served as one of the Council's chief mediators, spoke with a voice like water over rocks. Perhaps the humans could explain why they find this situation so disturbing. Many species represented here have different child-rearing practices. The Lumineth, for example, lay eggs and never see their offspring. The Korathi raise young communally with no individual parental bonds. Why should human practices take precedence? Hyun looked at Yoonji, who took a deep breath and began to explain. Human children are not small adults. Their brains are still developing. They form powerful emotional bonds with their parents and caregivers. Breaking these bonds causes permanent neurological changes. A human child separated from their family does not just feel sad. Their brain chemistry changes. They can develop lifelong anxiety, depression, attachment disorders, and other serious conditions. She pulled up more data, comparing brain scans of healthy human children with those of the imprisoned ones. Look at the amygdala activity. Look at the cortisol levels. These children's brains are being damaged by their confinement. Not temporarily stressed. Damaged. Fascinating, Vextar said. This supports our research goals. Clearly, human juveniles are more fragile than we understood. This makes the study even more valuable. Jiho, standing behind the ambassador, clenched his fists. The casual way Vextar discussed traumatizing children as a research opportunity made him want to leap across the chamber and tear the insectoid apart with his bare hands. Hyun must have sensed his anger because he spoke quickly. The VRNN claim to be a civilized species. They claim to value knowledge and understanding. But they are torturing children in the name of science. We demand the immediate release of all 23 children and their return to their families. Denied, Krienal said flatly. The VRNN have violated no laws. Council precedent supports their actions. Unless you can provide evidence of actual harm beyond emotional distress, we cannot override sovereign territorial rights. Emotional distress. Hyun's voice carried across the chamber. You are talking about children. Human children who cry themselves to sleep every night because they want their mothers. Who do not understand why they were taken. Who think they did something wrong and are being punished. Emotion is not a legal argument, Krienal replied. Many species here do not experience what you call parental love. To them, your reaction seems irrational. Dorak, a crystalline being that communicated through light pulses, flashed a message that the translators rendered as, query, do humans claim their young are somehow more valuable than other species' offspring? We claim our young are vulnerable and deserve protection, Yoonji said. We claim that keeping children in cages is wrong, regardless of legal technicalities. Wrong according to human morality, Krienal observed. Not according to galactic law. Hyun turned to face the full council. Then, your laws are broken. Any system that allows the imprisonment and traumatization of children needs to be changed. You dare to demand we change thousands of years of legal precedent? Krienal's feathers stood on end. Earth has been a council member for 5 years. You are the youngest species here. You do not dictate terms to us. Then, maybe we should not be part of a council that thinks laws matter more than children, Hyun said quietly. The chamber erupted in noise. Various species chittered, flashed, roared, or bubbled their outrage at the implied threat. Jiho noticed that not all reactions were negative. Some species seemed thoughtful. Others were clearly uncomfortable with the situation but bound by legal precedent. Vextar raised all 4 arms for attention. The VRNN collective wishes to make a statement. We do not understand human distress over this situation. In our society, young are raised by the hive. Individual attachment does not exist. We assumed other species were similar or could adapt. Clearly, we were incorrect about human biology. However, legal precedent supports our actions. We will not release the juveniles based solely on emotional appeals. Hyun looked at Yoonji, then, at Jiho, then, back at the council. Then, let me be very clear. Earth demands the immediate release of our children. We have tried diplomacy. We have presented scientific evidence. We have explained our position. If you will not release them voluntarily, we will take them by force. The chamber went silent. Even Krianael seemed shocked by the direct threat. You would risk war over this? Over our children? Absolutely, Hyun said. You keep talking about laws and precedent and territorial rights. But you imprisoned human children. Children. And you are debating legality. Are you mental? The last question came out raw and furious, all diplomatic protocol abandoned. For a moment, Hyun looked less like an ambassador and more like what he was beneath the formal robes. A father of 3, standing in a room full of aliens who thought laws mattered more than kids crying for their parents. Krianael's translator struggled with the phrase, "Are you mental?" rendering it in several different ways across the various species' communication systems. Some understood it as questioning their sanity. Others interpreted it as challenging their intelligence. All recognized it as a profound insult. This session is adjourned, Krianael announced. We will reconvene in 6 hours. Ambassador Hyun, I strongly suggest you reconsider your threats. The Council has destroyed entire civilizations for less. Then, destroy us, Hyun said. But, those children are going home. As the various representatives left the chamber, Jiho approached the ambassador. Sir, did we just declare war on the Galactic Council? No, Hyun said tiredly. We declared that some things matter more than galactic politics. Now we need to figure out how to get those kids out before this situation gets worse. Yoonji was reviewing her data when she stopped suddenly. Hyun, I found something. The VRWN records. There is a gap in their cultural history. About 3,000 years ago, something changed in their society. Before that gap, their records mention individual family units. What are you saying? I am saying the VRWN were not always a hive mind. They transitioned to it. And, they might have forgotten what it feels like to lose a child. Jiho looked toward where Vexstar had been standing. Then, maybe we need to remind them. In orbit, Admiral Suyin Han watched the diplomatic vessel depart from the station. She had her orders. If negotiations failed, she was authorized to extract the children by any means necessary. The 3 cruisers and 2 destroyers were not Earth's full strength, but they represented humanity's willingness to fight for its young. She opened a secure channel to Earth. This is Admiral Han. Recommend additional ships be sent to Meridian. This situation is going to get worse before it gets better. Back on the station, 23 children sat in their cells, unaware that the entire galaxy was arguing over their fate. They only knew they wanted to go home. Corporal Miho Choi was not supposed to be at the council session. He was security detail, meant to stand quietly in the background while diplomats talked. But, when Ambassador Hyun requested permission for him to speak, Krianael was too surprised to refuse. Miho stood before the assembled species of the Galactic Council, a young soldier who looked uncomfortable in the spotlight. He had survived 3 combat deployments, faced enemy fire without flinching, but, speaking to hundreds of alien beings made his hands shake. I am not a scientist or a diplomat, he began. I am just a soldier. But, I was asked to speak because I understand what those children are going through. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When I was 8 years old, there was a massive earthquake on Earth. My city was destroyed. I was separated from my family for 19 days. Just 19 days. I was fed. I had shelter. Aid workers took care of me. By VRWN standards, I was adequately maintained. Miho's voice grew quieter. 30 years later, I still have nightmares about those 19 days. I still panic in small spaces. I still struggle with trust and attachment. 19 days changed my brain permanently. The VRWN want to keep human children for years. Vexstar's mandibles clicked. You describe individual weakness, not species-wide vulnerability. One human juvenile's poor adaptation does not represent all. He is not weak, Dr. Yunji interjected sharply. He is damaged by trauma. And he is not unique. Human children are neurologically wired to bond with caregivers. Breaking those bonds causes measurable, permanent changes in brain structure. This is not opinion. This is biological fact. She projected new data, highlighting specific neural pathways. The human brain does not fully develop until age 25. Children need stable, loving relationships to develop properly. Without them, the prefrontal cortex develops abnormally. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. Stress hormone production increases permanently. A new voice entered the discussion. Keldar, a reptilian representative who had been silent until now, spoke with a hissing accent. Explain this simply. We are not all experts in human biology. What exactly happens to a human child separated from its parents? Yunji took a breath. Imagine taking a plant that needs sunlight and putting it in darkness. It will not die immediately, but it will not grow correctly. Its leaves will be malformed. Its roots will be weak. Even if you put it back in sunlight later, the damage is permanent. Human children separated from their families are like that plant. They survive, but they do not develop correctly. All species face hardship during development, Krienal objected. This is natural selection. The strong survive. The weak do not. These are not wild animals competing for survival, Miho said, his voice hard. These are children who were taken from their families by force. They did not fail at natural selection. They were kidnapped by a species that claims to be civilized. Legal collection, not kidnapping, Vexstar repeated for what felt like the 100th time. Hyun stood again. Then, let us test your certainty. Bring one of the children here. Let the council see for themselves what your legal collection has achieved. The chamber erupted in debate. Many species considered it inappropriate to involve juveniles in political matters. Others were curious. Krienal consulted with several other council members before announcing, this is highly irregular, but we will allow it. One juvenile human may address the council. 20 minutes later, a small girl was escorted into the chamber. Youngji was 10 years old, thin from 6 months of poor eating, her eyes carrying shadows no child should have. She wore the simple gray clothing provided by the VRYN, several sizes too large for her shrinking frame. Yunji knelt beside her. Youngji, these are the leaders of many worlds. They want to understand what has happened to you. Can you tell them? Youngji looked at the assembled aliens with obvious fear. So many strange creatures, so many eyes watching her. But, she nodded slowly. What do you want to say? Keldar asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for a species that laid eggs and never knew their own young. Youngji's voice came out small and hollow, a dead tone that disturbed everyone who heard it. I want to know why. Why did they take us? What did we do wrong? You did nothing wrong, Yunji assured her. Then, why? Youngji's eyes filled with tears. I tried to be good. I did not make noise. I ate everything they gave me. I did all the tests they wanted. But, they would not let me see my mom. Why would not they let me see my mom? Vexstar shifted uncomfortably. The juvenile was collected for scientific study. Personal feelings are irrelevant to research. I am not a thing to study, Youngji said, her voice still flat but with an edge of anger. I am a person. My name is Youngji. I like drawing and reading and playing with my little brother. I was going to a new planet where my dad got a job. We were going to have a house with a garden. Mom said I could have a puppy. She looked directly at Vexstar. You took me from my family. You took me from my mom and dad and little brother. You put me in a room by myself. You did tests that hurt. You never told me why. You never told me when I could go home. We provided adequate nutrition and shelter, Vextar stated. Youngji laughed, a broken sound that made several council members flinch. You gave me food, but I could not eat it. You gave me a bed, but I could not sleep. Every night, I had nightmares. Every day, I waited for someone to say it was a mistake, that I could go home. But no one came. Keldar leaned forward. Child, what do you want? The question seemed to break something in Youngji. Tears ran down her face, and, when she spoke, her voice finally carried emotion, raw, desperate, and achingly simple. I just want to go home. I just want my mom. Please. I just want my mom. The chamber went silent. In that moment, every species present understood something fundamental. They might not have parental bonds themselves. They might raise their young differently or not at all. But they understood home. They understood safety. And they understood that the small being in front of them was asking for something that should never have been taken away. A small voice came from the entrance. Youngji. A woman stood there, held back by security but straining forward. She had the same eyes as Youngji, the same shape to her face. The child's mother had somehow made it to the station, desperate to find her daughter. Mom! Youngji's dead voice shattered into pure joy and grief. She ran toward her mother, but Vierwen and security blocked her path. This is a violation of protocol, Krienal started to say. Let her through, Keldar commanded, his voice carrying authority that surprised everyone. Now. Security moved aside. Mother and daughter crashed together, both crying, both holding each other like the world would end if they let go. Youngji kept repeating, Mom, 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 while her mother whispered, I'm here, baby, I'm here, over and over. The council chamber, designed for rational debate and logical decision-making, became witness to something that transcended law and precedent. They saw what it meant for a human child to be reunited with her parent. They saw the relief, the love, the desperate need that had been denied for 6 months. Even Vextar seemed affected, mandibles clicking in patterns that suggested confusion or possibly distress. Miho approached Youngji's mother quietly. Ma'am, I need you to tell the council what these 6 months have been like for you. The woman looked up, tears still streaming. Every day, I thought I would die from the pain. My daughter was taken, and I could not protect her. I could not hold her when she was scared. I could not tell her everything would be okay. I could do nothing except beg and plead and try to get someone, anyone, to help me get her back. She looked at Vextar directly. You talk about laws and rights and scientific study. But you stole my child. You made her suffer. You made me suffer. And you act like it is normal, like it is acceptable. What kind of civilization does this? In the background, Youngji was checking her scanner again. She showed the results to Hyun quietly. Youngji's cortisol levels just dropped by 60%. Just from seeing her mother. That is how important this bond is for human children. It is not emotional weakness. It is biological necessity. Hyun turned to the council. You have seen the evidence. You have heard testimony. You have seen a child reunited with her parent. Can any of you honestly say the VRWN should keep those children in confinement? Krienal looked uncomfortable. The law is clear. Territorial rights supersede individual cases. Then, change the law, Keldar said. The reptilian had not moved from his position, but his tone had shifted completely. I have seen enough. I propose immediate amendment to Council Law protecting the developmental rights of all species young. Seconded, came a gurgling voice from the aquatic section. This is unprecedented, Krienal protested. So is imprisoning children, Keldar replied. We claim to be civilized. We claim to be better than primitive species that act on instinct alone. But, what does civilization mean if not protecting those who cannot protect themselves? Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly. The Hive Collective must consult on this matter. We acted within established law. Changing that law retroactively sets dangerous precedent. Keeping children in cages is dangerous precedent, Miho said quietly. As debate continued, Youngji remained in her mother's arms, finally, safe, finally, home. She did not care about galactic law or precedent or diplomatic incidents. She only cared that the nightmare was over. But, for 22 other children still locked in VRWNN cells, the nightmare continued. And, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not negotiate when it came to their young. Admiral Suyin Han watched her tactical display with the calm focus of someone who had commanded warships for 20 years. 8 more human vessels had arrived in the past 12 hours, joining her small fleet in orbit around Galactic Station Meridian. They were not the largest ships in the galaxy, not by far, but they represented something the older species had forgotten. Humanity remembered how to fight. On the station, Ambassador Hyun received confirmation from Earth. The message was simple and direct. Extract our children. Use whatever force is necessary. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session, but the atmosphere had changed. Keldar's proposal to protect developmental rights of all species young had gained surprising support. Nearly a third of the Council species had experienced similar situations with their own young, though none had been willing to challenge the established law before. But, Vextar and the VRWNN Collective remained unmoved. The law supports our actions. The Hive Collective will not surrender legally obtained research subjects based on emotional arguments. They are not research subjects, Hyun said wearily. They are children. The distinction is irrelevant to us, Vextar replied. Behind the scenes, Dr. Yunji and Corporal Miho had been working on a different approach. With Keldar's quiet assistance, they had gained access to the VRWNN historical archives, databases that the Hive Collective maintained but rarely consulted. What they found changed everything. Ambassador, you need to see this, Yunji said, pulling him aside between council sessions. She showed him ancient VRWNN records, translated by the station's AI. 3,000 years ago, the VRWNN were not a hive mind. They had individual families, parental bonds, emotional attachments. What happened? A plague. It killed millions and left the survivors neurologically damaged. The only way they survived as a species was to link their minds together, creating the first hive consciousness. It saved them, but it also erased their cultural memory of individual bonds. Miho pointed to specific entries. Look at these. These are records from just before the transition. VRWNN parents mourning lost children. VRWNN children crying for dead parents. The emotional language is almost identical to how humans describe grief and loss. Hyun stared at the records. So they have forgotten what they once were. More than that, Yunji said. The transition was so traumatic that they deleted all memory of it from their collective consciousness. They know it happened, but they do not remember what it felt like. They cannot understand human grief because they have blocked out their own. Can we use this? We can try to help them remember, Yunji said. The question is whether they will listen. Hyun requested a private meeting with Vextar, held in a neutral conference room away from the main council chamber. The Hive coordinator arrived flanked by VRWNN warriors, making it clear they expected a trap. We have discovered something about your species' history, Hyun began. Something your collective may have forgotten. He projected the ancient records. Images of individual VRNN families, emotional testimony from parents and children, evidence of a species that once understood everything humanity was trying to explain. Vextar's mandibles stopped clicking. The Hive coordinator stood perfectly still, processing the information through the quantum links that connected it to billions of other VRNN minds. "This is disturbing," Vextar finally said. "We knew of the Great Transition. We did not know it involved the loss of such fundamental behaviors." "Your species survived by forgetting," Yunji said gently. "By becoming a hive mind, you saved yourselves from extinction. But, you lost something important in the process." "We lost the ability to understand what you are experiencing," Vextar said slowly. "The human juveniles are not simply specimens to us. They are incomprehensible. We could not imagine why you cared so deeply because we had forgotten that we once cared the same way." "Then, help us," Hyun urged. "Release the children. Let them go home to their families. You do not have to remember your own pain to recognize someone else's." But, before Vextar could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. "Medical emergency in the VRNN sector. Human juvenile in critical condition." They ran. Diplomatic protocol abandoned, they simply ran toward the cells where the children were held. Jiho was already there, having heard the alarm from his security post. Through the transparent barrier, they could see medical personnel working frantically. It was Jaiwan, the youngest of the imprisoned children. Only 6 years old, she had collapsed during the morning medical scan. Now she lay unconscious while VRNN doctors, trained in hundreds of species biologies, struggled to stabilize her. "What happened?" Yunji demanded. A VRNN medical technician explained in clinical terms. The juvenile stress hormone levels exceeded sustainable parameters. Combined with 6 months of elevated cortisol, poor sleep quality, and inadequate nutrient absorption due to stress-induced digestive issues, her system simply shut down. "She is dying from stress," Yunji translated. "From being separated from her family for 6 months." Youngji, still on the station with her mother, heard about Jaiwan's collapse. She pushed her way to the barrier, her mother following. "Let me in there. Please. She needs someone who understands." "That is against protocol," a VRNN guard said. "I do not care about your protocol." Youngji shouted with surprising force for a 10-year-old. "She is 6 years old and she is dying because you took her from her family. Let someone help her." Vextar made a decision. "Lower the barrier. Allow the human juveniles to be together." The barrier dropped. Youngji rushed to Jaiwan's side, taking the small girl's hand. "Jaiwan, it is me. It is Youngji. You are going to be okay. I promise. We are going home soon. Your mommy is coming. Just hold on." Jaiwan's eyes fluttered open. "Youngji. I am here. We all are. You are not alone." Something in Jaiwan's reading started to improve. The presence of another human, the sound of a familiar voice, the simple comfort of not being isolated, it made a difference. Not enough to fully heal her, but enough to stabilize her condition. Yunji turned to Vextar. "This is what we have been trying to tell you. Human children need each other. They need their families. They need connection. Without it, they die. Not immediately, but slowly, from the inside out." Vextar's entire body seemed to shudder. Through the quantum link, billions of VRNN minds were processing the same information, experiencing the same revelation. They had caused this. Their legal rights, their scientific curiosity, their inability to understand, it had brought a child to the edge of death. "The collective is disturbed," Vextar said. "We did not intend this outcome." "Intent does not matter," Jiho said harshly. "Results matter. That little girl almost died because you kept her in a cage for 6 months. In orbit, Admiral Suyin received new orders from Earth. 24 hours. If the children were not released in 24 hours, she was authorized to begin extraction operations. It would mean war with the VRYN, possibly war with the entire Galactic Council. But Earth had made its decision. Some things were worth fighting for. Children were worth dying for. The eldest, an ancient artificial intelligence that had advised the Galactic Council for thousands of years, finally broke its long silence. It manifested as a holographic presence in the council chamber, startling everyone. The eldest rarely intervened, and, when it did, civilizations paid attention. "I have observed this debate with great interest," the eldest synthesized voice echoed. "I have watched species rise and fall across millennia. I have seen civilizations achieve great technological heights only to collapse from moral failure." The hologram displayed images from dozens of extinct civilizations. These species all shared something in common. They became so focused on law, on order, on logic, that they forgot compassion. They became so efficient at survival that they forgot how to live. The eldest turned its attention to Vextar. The VRNN survived extinction through adaptation. You should be praised for that. But, in your adaptation, you lost something precious. The question now is whether you will choose to relearn it or continue down a path that leads to the same extinction you once escaped. What are you saying? Krianael demanded. I am saying that civilizations are not judged by their laws but by how they treat the vulnerable. The humans are asking you to recognize that keeping their children in confinement is wrong, regardless of legal justification. This is not weakness. This is the foundation of any society that wishes to endure. The eldest's hologram faded, leaving the council in stunned silence. An AI that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires had just told them that humanity was right. Vextar stood in the center of the chamber. Through the quantum link, the entire Hive collective was experiencing something unprecedented. Uncertainty. Doubt. And, for the first time in 3,000 years, something that might have been called guilt. The collective requires time to deliberate, Vextar announced. You have 24 hours, Hyun said. After that, we come for our children. And, your laws, your treaties, your territorial rights, none of it will stop us. In the medical bay, Jaiwan was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, her small hands still holding Youngji's. Youngji's mother sat nearby, and, slowly, other parents who had made desperate journeys to the station began arriving. They could not reach their children yet, but they were there, waiting, hoping. The galaxy held its breath. 24 hours to decide between law and compassion, between precedent and morality, between maintaining order and doing what was right. The countdown had begun. The VRNN Hive collective spent 20 hours in deliberation. Billions of minds connected across quantum links, processing information, sharing perspectives, experiencing something they had not felt in 3,000 years. They were learning to remember. Vextar arrived at the human delegation's quarters alone, without guards or ceremonial escort. The Hive coordinator looked different somehow, movements less certain, mandibles clicking in irregular patterns. We must speak, Vextar said to Ambassador Hyun. Not as coordinator to diplomat, but as one being trying to understand another. They met in a simple conference room. Hyun, Dr. Yoonji, Captain Jiho, and Corporal Miho on one side. Vextar, representing billions, on the other. The collective has accessed our ancient archives, Vextar began. We have read accounts of VRYN parents mourning their young. We have processed data showing our ancestors experienced bonds similar to what you describe. But, reading about emotions and understanding them are different things. Yes, Yoonji agreed quietly. We still do not feel what you feel. The Hive consciousness cannot replicate individual attachment. But, we have come to understand something else. Vextar paused, struggling with concepts that had no place in hive thinking. We have asked ourselves a question that we have not considered in millennia. Not, what is legal, but, what have we become? Jiho leaned forward. And, what answer did you find? We became survivors. We became efficient. We became logical and, ordered and, strong. Vextar's voice, filtered through the translator, carried something that might have been sadness. But, we also became something that could look at a suffering child and see only a research specimen. We became something that values law over life. We became, perhaps, what you would call a monster. Hyun started to speak, but, Vextar continued. You asked if we are mental. The answer is yes. The Great Transition damaged more than our individual consciousness. It damaged our ability to recognize suffering in others. We deleted our own pain and, in doing so, lost the capacity to understand anyone else's pain. You can relearn, Yunji said. Understanding is the first step. The collective has made a decision, Vextar announced. We will release all 23 human juveniles immediately. We will issue a formal apology to humanity and, to the families we have harmed. We will submit to human oversight in developing new protocols for any future interactions with human young. The relief in the room was palpable, but, Vextar was not finished. More than this, we are beginning a process we call memory restoration. We will study our own lost history, relearn what we were before the Great Transition. Not to become individuals again, but, to remember why individual bonds matter. So we never forget again. Why? Miho asked. You could have continued as you were. You are powerful enough that we could not force you to change. Vextar's mandibles clicked in a pattern the translator struggled to interpret. Because that child, Jaiwan, nearly died. And, in that moment, the collective felt something we thought we had evolved beyond. We felt responsible. We felt wrong. If even a hive mind can feel shame, then, perhaps we have not lost everything our ancestors once knew. 3 hours later, barriers came down throughout the VRWNN sector. 23 human children walked out of confinement, blinking in the brighter lights of the main station. Parents who had traveled across the galaxy in desperate hope rushed forward. The reunions that followed were chaotic, emotional, and beautiful. Youngji held her little brother for the first time in 6 months, both of them crying. Jaiwan, still weak but recovering, was scooped up by her mother who refused to put her down. A 13-year-old boy named Taeyang, who had stayed strong for the younger children throughout their imprisonment, finally, broke down in his father's arms. The Galactic Council reconvened to formalize what would become known as the Protection of Sapient Development Act. The debate was long and complicated, with many species arguing about specific provisions, but the core principle was simple. All member species would respect the developmental needs of other species young, regardless of how foreign those needs might seem. Keldar, who had been instrumental in pushing for change, summarized it perfectly. We are many species with many ways of raising our young. But, we are one council, and, we must protect all forms of life, especially those who cannot protect themselves. The act passed with overwhelming support. The VRWNN voted in favor, the first time they had ever voted for legislation that restricted their own territorial powers. KRENAL, who had initially opposed the humans, made a surprising statement. I questioned whether human emotion should influence galactic law. I was wrong. Law without compassion is not justice. It is simply rules enforced by power. In the weeks that followed, the children returned to their families and began the long process of healing. Earth established new protocols for protecting human colonists traveling through alien space. The VRWNN began sharing their historical archives with human psychologists, hoping to understand what they had lost and how to recognize its absence. Vextar visited Jaiwan's family one final time before they departed for New Perth. The 6-year-old hid behind her mother's legs, still frightened of the large insectoid. "I do not expect forgiveness," Vextar said. "I only wish to say that the collective has learned from you. Your suffering taught us something we had forgotten. You helped us remember how to be more than efficient. You helped us remember how to be good." Jaiwan's mother looked at the being that had imprisoned her daughter. She could have said many things. She could have been angry, harsh, unforgiving. Instead, she said something that surprised everyone, including herself. "Thank you for letting her go. Thank you for learning." It was not forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Ambassador Hyun's final report to Earth became one of the most widely read documents in human history. He wrote, "We came to the stars hoping to find advanced civilizations that could teach us wisdom. Instead, we found that some wisdom is uniquely human. We understand childhood in a way many species do not. We understand the bonds between parent and child, the sacred duty to protect the vulnerable, the recognition that some things matter more than laws or efficiency or logic. The VRNN called our children specimens. We called them what they are, our future, our joy, our responsibility. In standing firm on this principle, we did not just save 23 children. We reminded the galaxy what civilization truly means. We are not the strongest species. We are not the oldest or most advanced. But, we know that a society is judged not by its technology or its laws, but by how it treats its children. This is what it means to be human." The children themselves adapted in different ways. Some recovered quickly, young enough that the trauma would fade with time and therapy. Others struggled for years, carrying scars that would never fully heal. But, they were home, with their families, where they belonged. Youngji, the 10-year-old who had spoken before the Galactic Council, became something of a symbol. When she was old enough, she wrote a children's book about her experience. It was simple, written in language any child could understand, but it carried a powerful message. Even when you are scared and alone, someone is looking for you. Someone loves you. And, someday, you will go home. The book was translated into 47 different alien languages. Even species that did not raise their young with parental bonds found value in its message about connection, hope, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. Years later, when Youngji was grown, she returned to Galactic Station Meridian as a human ambassador. She met with Vextar, who had continued working on memory restoration for the VRNN species. "Do you remember what you asked me before the council?" Vextar asked. "I asked what I wanted," Youngji recalled. "I said I just wanted to go home. I just wanted my mom." That simple statement changed everything for the collective. We had forgotten that the most profound truths are often the simplest. A child wants their parent. A being wants to feel safe. Connection matters more than efficiency. "Have you found what you were looking for in your archives?" Youngji asked. "We have found pieces of what we lost. We will never be what we were before the Great Transition. But, we can be something new. Something that remembers both the strength of the hive and the value of the individual. You helped teach us that." Youngji looked out at the vast station, thinking of the scared 10-year-old she had been, of the 22 other children who had suffered with her, of the parents who had fought so hard to bring them home. "My mom always said that the hardest experiences teach the most important lessons," she said. "I wish we had not needed to learn this way. But, I am glad something good came from it." In her hand, she carried a message that would be archived in the council records, placed next to the Protection of Sapient Development Act. It was written in a child's handwriting, the same message she had sent years ago: "Thank you for letting me come home." That message remained there for generations, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths. A reminder that being civilized does not mean being emotionless or logical or efficient. It means knowing when to let compassion guide your actions. It means understanding that some things are worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. Children are worth it. Family is worth it. Love is worth it. This is what it means to be human. And, in teaching the galaxy that lesson, humanity had found its place among the stars. Not as warriors or diplomats or scientists, but as beings who understood that the measure of any civilization is how it treats its children. The VRWN never forgot again. Neither did the galaxy. And 23 human children went home, carried the memory of fear and suffering, yes, but also carried the knowledge that they were loved enough that the entire galaxy had stood up for them. That knowledge, perhaps, was worth more than any law or treaty or diplomatic victory. It was proof that in a vast and, often cold universe, there were still beings who would fight for what was right, who would stand against the darkness, who would say, "These are our children, and you will not harm them." Humanity had declared that some things were non-negotiable. The galaxy had listened. And the stars burned a little brighter for it.